we're going to get into The Last of Us, I think, just straight away. Unless you guys have
Spoiler
objections. I guess, yeah. At this point, I don't know why anyone comes to our channel if they're worried about spoilers.
Yeah.
It's funny, I hadn't seen one in forever until I guess somebody on a video, they got mad about something you put up about the first episode.
Yeah. Did you like my response to him?
Yeah.
We're gonna spoil
if
episode.
they haven't seen the show, why would they be watching clips about the show?
Yeah. Oh no,
We're
a
gonna
clip
spoil
about
episode 3.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the entire thing. It's how the channel works. We try to go through as much of it as possible, and I typically will have some form of the episode, movie, or whatever on screen for everyone to see. So yeah, let's talk just a little bit. Excuse me. Let's talk just a little bit about thoughts on the episode. Just your general reaction after watching it.
All right. Well, I kind of thought it was the more I process it, the worse it becomes in my mind.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so probably as a standalone episode, it would be fine. Maybe.
Okay.
But it seemed very emotionally manipulative.
Okay.
You know, they tried to hit all the kind of contrived and forced some things to happen in order to, produce this aura of emotionalism and, try and pull your heartstrings, like with the guy getting sick at the end. I'm trying not to jump too far ahead, but we'll get into the reasons when we get there. But my general thoughts were that it's kind of fine, bland. But again, the more I think about it, the worse that it's getting in my mind, because I mean, I don't know, like Ellie, again, she comes off as just a brat in this, and I can't tell again if it's how she's written or if it's the actress or if it's both. I just don't like her and don't care for her. I think it would have been better if this was the route they were going to go, to just kept Sarah and not even have Ellie in this.
Oh, dude, that would have. I don't know what happens if you had tried to do something like that. I mean, at that point, I would say, at that point, you're just back to, why are these people adapting a video game that they clearly don't understand or know anything about?
Yeah,
I'm
just saying, with just how Ellie is being portrayed, she just comes across as a brat for the most part. The opening scene, though, when he's standing right by the river, bothered me because he had a knee down in the water. I'm like, bro, I would not be having my knee down right in water. Okay. Or, wet dirt. Just bothering me. I'm like, bro, you got pants on. Don't put...
I don't think they care. I mean, you got to remember, they waded through...
I'm just messing around.
That hospital.
It's just something that's
episode.
That would bother me when I saw him do that.
And this is why you wouldn't survive in the apocalypse, Joseph, because you wouldn't be able to put your knee in the water in jeans.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously cold. Why do I want my kneecap cold?
I don't think he cares.
Yeah, you have to worry about hypothermia and that kind of
on my kneecap
situation.
There are
your kneecap. Some of us have weak knees.
I think everybody with weak knees is probably dead by now.
See, I think he would survive longer in the apocalypse because he's being conscious about preserving his body.
Exactly.
And his clothing.
Thoughts, technically.
I thought that this was the best episode because Ellie wasn't in it. I'm torn. I'm torn. There were elements of this episode that were fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then there were parts of it, just like you said, that were extremely emotionally manipulative without being earned whatsoever.
Yeah.
And if it was a standalone thing, it probably would have worked better. But the fact that there are only 9 episodes of the show, we're a third of the way through, and we spent this much time not on the main story, is problematic.
Yeah.
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 That was the other point I was going to make. It felt like a tangent, and it didn't seem. So this is
It was a nice tangent, but it wasn't necessary.
yes, and this is the thing that I think of. Okay, well, if first off, it takes away from the main plot, and it doesn't really move anything forward. I don't see the truck as being that major of a plot device, especially considering they passed a perfectly good truck in the last episode.
Yeah, that goes back to what I've been saying since the beginning, is like this whole thing where they're inciting reason to get Ellie into Go. It's like, I thought batteries and trucks were rare, but we've now seen, well, it was a dead battery originally, but then the Fireflies seem to have vehicles, and they could have gotten that one. And then on top of that, now, I mean, it makes sense why Bill has one. Like they do a good job, I think, of like kind of explaining that for the most part, even though there's some like questions about how certain aspects of the town were as good as they were for that long. You know what I mean? And that's not, it is, again, it's a kind of a deviation from the game, because in the game, he does have this town, but it's like way more rundown. And he's kind of living like a hoarder. Like he does have a truck, but that's kind of based on his personality. So you're like, okay, well, that makes sense. But he doesn't have like all these nice things going on. So we'll talk about that a little bit more into it, because I agree with technically. I think that there are some very good characterization things that are done in this for Bill. One of the things that's weird to me is, and again, we're getting into spoilers to a degree, but like whether Bill's coming back or not, because I'm not sure if you guys noticed it, but like they don't 100% make it evident that he's just gone. And in the game,
it's heavily implied, but
yeah,
they didn't show his dead body.
Yeah,
right.
and
he could have been lying about that, but I don't know why that's something you would lie about.
Mm-hmm. Well, the interest there's stuff that makes me think it. For one, he's not dead in the game, so unless they're just doing a massive deviation.
But also, he's not dead in the game, but also the purpose that he served in the game has been accomplished. They have a car now.
Yeah, which is weird because, and it's something that's kind of odd about this show, is that there's kind of not a lot of action in it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I, we had the episode last week with the clickers, which is great. I actually really enjoyed that episode. And then we had a little bit of it in this one, but to be honest, I was kind of at the point where I was like, I just want to see more of him, like Bill doing stuff like that. Like they don't seem to really.
But even that was contrived though. That action sequence with the Raiders.
Wait, why?
Yeah, they built it up like there was gonna be a cool fight scene with all these people trying to break into Bill's house, and then it was Bill standing in the open with a sniper rifle.
That part was
and getting shot.
Yeah,
and
just so that you could have the drama there.
This guy would be way more capable than what they're showing. He's a prepper. He's got all these guns. He's know these kinds of people.
Them. He's gonna know to be behind cover, and then on top of that, when he gets
I'm
shot,
friends with lots of people like this.
He's like,
they would know how to act.
Just call Joel. The electrical fence and all my traps will take care of the rest. It's like, okay, well then why? If your traps and everything,
then why were you out there risking getting
in
shot?
the middle of the open?
Yeah.
It's one thing to be like behind cover shooting and things
or
like
that. From his big tall house, he could be shooting out of one of the windows.
Yeah, you'd think he'd have a perch in his house
it's like
somewhere.
a 3-story house.
Yeah, and this is why, man, I'm telling you, this is why there's certain stuff that they've deviated, and it's really funny. I don't know if you guys watched the sort of like. I typically don't watch these because usually the actors
after the show.
Yeah, it's usually just a bunch of dumb people saying dumb stuff. But this one is always really interesting to me because Neil Druckmann is directly involved with this. And he has said a couple things, and one of them that I found really interesting, and it's interesting in the context of this episode. It's also interesting in the context of where the show could be going in the future. He said, if there's things from the game that we think are done really well and that we can't make it like 100% better, then we stick with the game. So like you kind of got that in the previous episode. It's almost exactly the same. I still have my issues with them not using the spores, but I'll overlook it, whatever. The question that comes to mind with this is what potentially is coming in the future with Abby, and if they're going to deviate from The Last of Us Part 2, because Neil Druckmann, whether he wants to admit it or not, made a massive mistake in the way that he handled that in the writing. But Joseph, you were saying like that
you're talking season 2, game 2, in the
potentially,
future,
yeah. Though I don't know, I still don't know if they're gonna do season 2 directly into the game sequel.
Right.
They said,
so I don't know.
I think someone within the show, one of the showrunners or something like that, came out and said that they plan on doing season 2 or part 2 in season 2, the beginning. Take that
I
for
think
what you will.
Interesting.
I think that this episode in particular is evidence that they are not going to be deviating from the second game.
Okay. I could, yeah.
It has very similar politics and representation and really awkward sex scenes.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Like uncomfortably awkward.
So, yeah. What was odd about it, it seemed like that was the representation is all the characters boiled down to. Like the fact that, you know, they had this specific orientation and that's all there.
Well, Frank, sure. I mean, like I don't think you can argue that with Bill, though. I mean,
Bill
had
a lot of character.
I knew he was gay going into the episode. People have kind of been arguing whether that was the original intention in the first game.
It was definitely the intention.
I agree. I think it was very intentional the way that they set it up. I mean, but again, the way that the game did it, it was
a part of his backstory.
Yeah,
it's not his entire persona.
Exactly. And even in this, like, I don't mind what they were trying to accomplish. I think you're right, though. There's moments where it's like I don't think these guys really like what. First of all, he meets this guy in a hole, he feeds him, gives him a shower, and all of a sudden he's in love with the guy.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like nothing felt earned, and it felt, you know, when I say it, that's all it boils down to is that there wasn't any. Everything was cookie cutter as far as their relationship was concerned. There wasn't any depth to it. I mean, you got to think, I understand they're in this compound, right? And they're pretty well insulated from the outside world, but they show this pan shot, if I remember correctly, to where they're pretty close by a large city. So, which, you know, have issues with how well kept everything is. But anyway.
Yeah, they're outside Boston. I mean, I think that they do.
But
they do enough groundwork with the show to explain to you why he's at least relatively safe from the infected in the area that he's in.
I really liked all that stuff with his character too.
Yeah, I everything like and not even I was going to say up until the moment that he actually meets Frank. But even within a lot of that, there's a lot of good stuff there, but I think you're right. I think that it's almost like the time that they spent wasn't enough time for us to really establish all of that. And again, one of the big deviations that they went with this is that by the time you meet Bill in the game, there's clearly some sort of history with Joel, but you don't know a ton. And I'm not even sure if Joel is aware of Frank. So the timing of how like
I don't believe he does know about Frank in the game.
Yeah,
because you find it through notes,
right? And then you find out at some point that Frank left because he couldn't stand Bill.
They have a falling out and they end up hating each other.
Right, and then Frank is in this house, and I think he gets like surrounded or whatever, so he kills himself. So he gets
infected and then hangs himself.
That's right, and so he they keep some of that. But then there's a lot of it that was just like, man, they're like
here thinking that they just displayed their relationship as perfect, or just very like a cookie cutter type of relationship, rather than. I mean, you got to imagine like for anyone who has any sort of relationship, whether if you're married, with friends, with family, there's arguments and strife that comes in, difficulties.
There was one scene where they were arguing.
They did argue. I mean, I don't know if. Like, I guess it just depends on, and from that perspective, like what you were looking for from that. I mean, I didn't really find it super cookie cutter for the most part. I mean, I think they do a decent job of showing that like the two of them didn't agree on a lot of things. I mean, you have the whole scene with them with Frank bringing Tess and
Joel.
Tess and Joel into it, and Frank is over here trying to be really, really nice to the two of them, and
that scene was pretty great. The awkward dinner date was fun.
Yeah, I guess it would have just been better. Like, I guess it just goes back to what Technically Mexican said earlier on, to where it just nothing really felt earned. It seemed very fast, and I get it. You're doing a side quest of an episode, but maybe that's why you shouldn't do a side quest of an episode, and you just should stick to the main storyline.
And maybe if it was
just out
further
of
on
too.
in the season too, maybe but it's the third episode, and we don't even know the main characters yet.
Right.
Yeah. And that could be. I was thinking about that too. I mean, you have 2 hours hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes to roughly know the main characters, and to have a good sense. But I don't really have any kind of connection, even with Joel or especially Ellie. And I think maybe that's just due to the writing.
Yeah.
At the same time, as you're mentioning, technically, I do agree that I think the timing of this episode may be off. Maybe it should have been, next week's episode instead of this week, or then the midway point.
I thought what they were going to do was introduce Bill similarly to what they did in the game. Joel gets trapped in one of Bill's traps. It's like his foot gets caught and he like flips upside down, and these infected are running in, and Ellie's trying to like stop him or like stop them, and like you're shooting upside down or whatever. And obviously they're not going to do it exactly like that, but then
so in the games, Bill falls in love with Joel.
What are you? Wait, is that a joke?
It was a joke.
Oh, it was a joke. Sorry.
So they just gave that plot point to Frank.
Oh, right, because it's that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I mean that's how they meet, and then you go through this whole experience with them, and like Technically was saying, like you find notes about this relationship that he has with someone named Frank, and the only thing you really get out of Bill is that he was his partner, and so you can easily overlook what that actually meant. But I thought they were going to go in that direction, and so you kind of get to meet Bill. You get to meet this like curmudgeonly old man who lives alone in this town. He doesn't like people. He doesn't trust anybody. He is hardly on good terms with Joel when you meet him. And then, hey, Bill was always kind of an interesting character. Let's give a little backstory to this character. And then maybe in the 4th episode, you go into something like that, where it's like, we're going to take a break from the main story. We're about halfway through the season. And we think Bill is an interesting enough character to give you guys some more development on that, which I was totally fine with. In fact, I think, Joseph, we had talked about this. It's kind of what I was expecting, was that they were going to take some of these characters and flesh them out a little bit more, like be respectful of it, but flesh them out a little more. So yeah, it is a little strange that they went so hard into Bill's plot line, especially if they're planning on not having him come back. And so we've deterred off of this path.
What's the point if you've turned off the path?
Yeah, and then now we're right back at it, because I mean, even some of the previews for the next episode, I mean, we are now past the point in the game where Bill was relevant at all, and we are moving on to the next thing.
I think this episode would be a lot more effective if Bill doesn't die at the end. If he doesn't just, hey, I'm done too, because all the backstory could have made his character more interesting, but we spent all this time and now he's not even in the story anymore.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna tangent just for a second, because it just came back up to mind. I'll admit, I did not find Bella Ramsey quite as annoying in this episode as I did in the previous ones.
It wasn't as bad. There were still some moments that were annoying.
Yeah, they are at least attempting to do let's try to make a connection with Joel and Ellie now. There's even sort of like that moment when Ellie finds the note that Bill leaves, and it talks about like protecting the one that you love, and you kind of, I think that was handled well enough where it's like you get an idea of what they're setting Joel up for with Ellie. Now being the protector of this young girl. So there's stuff in it and stuff with the dynamic. Bella Ramsey, man, I just still think it was bad. I think it was bad casting.
I think
I agree with that.
Bad casting and bad writing, because it's not just her delivery; it's what she's saying. It's like she has a quota for how many F words she has to get off in the episode. And you're that's not going to make me like this little girl.
Yeah.
It doesn't really come across as endearing, and
it's not at all
lovable.
Yeah.
And I get you're in a post-apocalyptic world.
That's the kind of child that you smack, not that you love.
Yeah.
But it seemed like the writing was trying a little more like intentionally in this
lovable.
one. Yeah, and that she wasn't. And so it's odd, which also makes it a little bit inconsistent, I think, where it's like, okay, I guess it's because Tess is gone now. And so she's trying to be a little bit nicer. But then they're also doing this thing where Ellie is kind of bloodthirsty. And that, especially leading into what would be a second season, seems a little on the nose. And instead of doing a scenario where you have this innocent girl, for the most part, who is being thrust into a lot of this violence because of her condition, because of the man that she's traveling with, and then like her kind of growing up through all of that, and then potentially some of that having an effect on her in the future, they're just like going right into it. Like there's that scene in the first episode where Joel's beating up the Fedra guy, and like she has this look on her, like she does this thing where she kind of like is leaning over and she's like looking like, oh, that's awesome. She's like really obsessed with getting a gun. And then there was one other thing that happened in this the thing in this episode with the runner where it's buried underneath the building. Rubble. And she like goes
like torturing
up. Yeah, she's like messing with it, and I was just like, what are we doing? Like,
I mean, it was a really cool VFX shot.
Yeah,
to see the mushrooms underneath the skin.
Yeah,
but it didn't serve her character very well.
It's the thing is like I'm not 100% sure what they're trying to accomplish with her, other than the only thing that I'm able to really think of is that they're setting her up for the second season to go on her revenge quest.
Which is just not a good sign.
No, it's not.
It was a very cold and cynical moment, and I don't know, like I guess maybe in the future we'll play into something, kind of showing, as you mentioned, this bloodthirsty or dark side to her, but I don't know.
What makes it worse too is though is that his daughter, what's his daughter's name? Sarah.
Yeah.
She was great in episode 1. She was likable and endearing, and now she's replaced with this other person with who's supposed to remind him of his daughter.
Exactly.
And at every step is doing her best to be the complete opposite. Like I would prefer if they at this point I would prefer if they race swapped Ella and kept the actress who played his daughter and killed off Bella. What's her name? Bella Thorne?
Bella Ramsey.
Bella Ramsey.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see her die in episode 1 and then had the black chick around for the rest of the show.
Yeah, it could have worked better.
She was nice.
I mean, but to be honest, all you really needed to do was find someone who was like in her late teens with brown hair who slightly resembles Ellie, and you're like set.
Yeah.
And obviously you have to consider with them moving into another season, if she's going to really take up a lead role moving forward down the line, she actually has to be able to command the screen, which, let's be honest, Bella Ramsey might not be able to do. That's the other thing that I'm like, how are they going to handle a lot of this? Because Ellie is going to take up a major role later on. And so having her being the primary character, I mean, like, people like Pedro. They like his performance. He seems to be doing a pretty good job.
He's good.
But what are they going to do when that is not the primary focus of the story anymore?
Yeah, I think Zach's in the troll room is right that they should have flipped the casting, and the actress that played Sarah should have played Ellie, and then have Bella Ramsey play Sarah.
That was the point that I made.
He's better.
Yeah. I mean, as far as acting is concerned, it's definitely not a competition. But yeah, the other thing too is like, why didn't they just, this is where it comes back to what you guys have been saying about some of it's the casting, but some of it's got to be the writing too, because I'm sure Bella Ramsey can play a teenage girl who's like in that same vein as Sarah was. Like,
Right.
I don't understand why they're trying to kind of already make her like this somewhat hardened, embittered young girl, but then they have these moments where she sees the Mortal Kombat machine and she's like, oh my gosh, my friend was, and that's why I think a lot of that is jarring for me, is because those things
There are some good moments.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I think it worked better for me for the most part in this episode, because even the part where Joel's like, hey, let's go this way, I don't want you to see what's up ahead, and Ellie's like, oh, like whatever, it felt right, and it wasn't her being like bitter towards him. She just wasn't like, she's like, whatever, like I'm free, I'm out here, I'm doing my thing. She's this young teenage girl, and then she sees it and like reality starts setting in. So it's like that stuff works for me. It's these moments where like now she's down in this cave torturing a cordyceps creature where you're like, what are we doing again? Like what am I supposed to be connecting with this girl? Like what's going on, you know?
And it's kind of odd that, you know, he let her go in the back without going with her when he hasn't been there in 2 years, and so you never know if an infected or something has gotten in. I guess the idea would be the noise. I mean, I guess the argument could be made, well, the noise they made from going in probably would have attracted an infected.
Yeah.
But still, though,
You got to clear. He's in the military. He knows how to clear a room. He knows how to clear a building.
Yeah. Which again, we've talked about it in the previous episodes.
You saw the bumper sticker and everything. He's
exactly. He's in the military, guys. You know, you probably would have figured most of that out being from Texas and being stuck in this like hellscape of a world over the last like 20 years or whatever too. But like, yeah.
I think it's definitely a combination of the acting and the dialogue. And to bring up a point you guys talked about in an earlier episode when you're talking about show don't tell. Because we've addressed the military sticker, right? Another example of that in episode 2 was when Joel and the dead lady are talking to Ellie, and they straight up say, "Look, we're not good people," and you're like, okay, we're just gonna explain our characters verbatim. There are things you could have done to show them not being good people. It's not a line that you needed to deliver, but it was like, hey, this is our character. We are not good people. We're willing to do whatever it takes. And they had to say that with dialogue because they weren't proficient enough to show us these characters.
Which is so surprising because they already had the blueprint from the game.
Yeah, which is why I think it's a problem with the writing too.
Yeah.
Like they don't know how to make her endearing. They're trying, but it's coming off as they're giving her these lines trying to make her snarky. But it's just coming off as unlikable.
Yeah,
it's just bad writing.
Yeah, I think you might be right on that, and some of it is definitely her performance, because it can't be that hard to come off as like a snarky teenager.
It's a bit of both, I think.
Yeah, like that's why I'm saying, going forward, I don't know what they're gonna do when she has to actually start like
carrying the show, having these emotional moments, and
that's gonna be difficult.
Being able to get an audience like behind her and like what she's going to try to go do. Again, if that's the way that they handle it, it's more morbid curiosity of where the show goes after the season than anything for me.
I think that's you mentioned earlier, David. I think you technically both did, but the hard nature of Ellie. This far, she's supposed to be 14, so yeah, she's a teenager, but I mean that's very early on being a teenager, and I know she's in this post-apocalyptic world, but it's kind of like, at least try and make her endearing. You know what I'm saying? Let her have these moments. Like, I did enjoy there are a few moments, the Mortal Kombat moment. I enjoyed even though I thought it was dumb, and it's like, would she really make that choice to go down into the bunker or whatever in the convenience store. But I did, okay, I can understand. She found some tampons. I bet that would be exciting to find. And oh, thank the Lord, I found some of these. And then there's this other moment where I forget the context, but I believe Joel was telling her something dark. And she just responds with grim. So instead of saying something annoying back and irate, she's just making a sarcastic comment like that. And that's the kind of things, okay, I can get behind that. It's the other moments I have an issue with.
Yeah, my 7-year-old kid says gulp now instead of gulping. I'm like, where did you learn this? It's so cringy. But it's
Yeah, but you could understand something like that coming out of like even her mouth or whatever. Or like I guess it's where you have to sit down. And again, it's tough with me in this show because they already have the blueprint.
Yeah.
You have what you need already, so it's like, why are you deviating with like her character in particular so much?
There is, and I nitpick this show a lot, and it's because of how much potential I think it has. Like this could be really good, and they're frequently dropping the ball in places where it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But with your point about the blueprint too, like they also have the blueprint for game 2. So that's also part of the problem.
Sheesh. Yeah.
So like how much do you want them to follow the blueprint until you don't want them to follow it?
This opening.
And I think the show is trying to mix both. I think it's trying to mix both game 1 and game 2. And so you're getting good stuff and bad stuff.
There we go.
That's a good point.
Nick Offerman, man.
What I've heard, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I think David said this last week that it seems like they're trying to right their wrongs between part 1 and part 2 and the lead up, and changing certain things now so that they make sense. I mean, Neil wants to double down on what's going to be the ending point. And so he's just trying to tweak things to where it makes more sense because he thinks that's a good story, right? Instead of just realizing, hey, you have 2 great characters that people love.
Yeah, and I told you, because I've been going back through the first game, the remastered one.
Right.
And then I want to do the remake that they just released at some point in the near future.
As soon as it comes out for PC, I'll play it.
Yeah, and then I want to go through part 2 again so that I'm up to date on part 2 so that I can accurately argue how terrible it is with people. Because it is. I mean, it's easy enough.
That's what I'm doing with the Wheel of Time. I'm rereading books 2 and 3.
Nice.
So when season 2 comes out, I can destroy it.
I'm doing the audiobooks. I'm about halfway through The Great Hunt right now.
That's my personal favorite book.
Okay.
It's not the best Wheel of Time book, but I love The Great Hunt.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've really been enjoying it. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Like I get to the point now where people will talk to me about movies I haven't seen in a couple years, and I'm like, I don't feel like I can give you an accurate opinion about this. I was like, I remember kind of liking this, but that could just be coming from a different perspective than I have about a lot of this now, about how you break things down, the contrivances that allow certain situations to happen, a la The Last of Us Part 2. There's a lot of different things that go on in these where I got to get ready for season 2 of The Last of Us, and having replayed that game in the somewhat recent future, it's got to be part of it. I'll probably end up live streaming it too, so that I don't have to go through that torture alone. But yeah, I don't know where they're headed. But yeah, technically you were saying like Nick Offerman, I think he did great in this.
He carried the episode.
Yeah.
Yep. As aside from all the complaints we had, the reason I enjoyed it is because of him.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can look past a lot of things because I love him. I miss Parks and Rec, okay? He's so good, and he's basically the same character but on steroids. And
and in a survival situation,
he's it's wonderful. But I wish I could have seen him be more awesome.
I wanted more
So
of it.
just commits suicide at the end.
Yeah, I love his opening when he comes in and he's like, oh,
Yep.
not today, you globalists, and like he's
It's such a good line.
yeah, he goes up, he goes upstairs and like he's doing his whole thing, and he realized, like, he has this, it's so good, and this is why there are really good moments in this and stuff that, like, Joseph and I have talked in the past about. There's this moment where, even if you don't really understand everything about him, he comes out and he's looking around and he realizes everyone's gone. And it's like, all we know as the audience, all of these people have essentially been taken to be murdered and left in a ditch.
And it's the best thing that could have happened to him.
Yeah, he's got this smirk on his face and he's like, all right. And it's like he's getting to live out this dream of his.
This is what I've been preparing for.
This is what I've always wanted.
Yeah.
Everyone to leave.
It was really fun.
And so, yeah, he goes to Home Depot. And they like turn the lights out and he's like, well, that was fast.
And so then he goes to the natural gas plant to turn on the gas. And I'm like,
steals a
all right, I see you. Wouldn't be that easy, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's like you can kind of go with it. The thing is like, how long would that have lasted him?
Well, here's the thing.
If he's the only one using
the military right now, my whole thing is, how long did he? It seemed to be pretty immediate after everyone left that he started doing this.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of think it would probably the natural gas would be a necessity at this point for the government, and they would have some kind of, maybe. I mean, they're dealing with the infected too,
right?
But have some kind of monitor on this to some extent. But yeah, no, the natural gas, I mean, that could, because of where they're pulling it from. I mean, I'm not going to get into all the technical breakdowns, but yeah, it could last them for a long time.
Okay.
Well, and especially really if you look at just how much of the population it affected too. Like they're scaling. This is going to last him forever.
Yeah,
if he's the only one using it, and the government is in a different place, like, yeah.
Oh yeah.
As long as from distribution point it's been turned on, and then the transmission point, and then you get.
Do they say the percentages in the games of
he turned
how
on
many people died? Because it was implied it was most people.
Yeah.
Like 90% probably.
If they did, it is not coming to mind.
That's the vibe I get from the show. Like 80 or 90% just died right off the bat.
Yeah, and then even with the show that they were saying that if there wasn't room in like the QZs for them, that they basically just murdered those people.
Murdered them because it was easier to kill them than to have them become infected. So.
Yeah. And so it's like there's stuff that it definitely makes sense. It was more of a just like, there's sort of those like technical aspects of him getting this done that you're like, dang man, like that's pretty proficient and somewhat lucky that so early on no one came back around,
Yeah, there wasn't anyone else that stayed.
But I guess they didn't care.
No one came back around. There wasn't any monitor on the gas plant. So on and so forth.
It's just one of those things that's like resources, and then you think too about stuff degrading over time. It's like if the natural gas stayed on for his entire life, he's very lucky that none of the equipment broke down that potentially would have required like a lot of effort from him.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that.
They show throughout the episode a lot of things breaking,
and Joel tells him about the fence, which I thought was really good. But that there is that part of me that's like his whole little thing that he has going on here before he meets Frank is like, I really enjoyed all of this, where he's like cooking and just collecting all of these different supplies or whatever, and putting up his electric fence and
just enjoying life. You would think though.
Happy music playing in the montage. It was good.
Yeah. Oh, he's got this part is really good too, where he's like watching the infected.
Oh yeah. And he watches his trap go off.
Yeah. It was like television for himself. That part cracked me up. You would think that though, that how pristine he keeps everything, that it would attract a lot more people than the show showed. I mean, it just seems kind of odd. I would imagine if you're in this kind of apocalyptic world that you would want to make everything seem run down, like no one lives here, that it's torn up, it's not well kept together. Again, I understand he has the fence, and and then the booby traps and everything. But I would imagine more people would come, and then like even some infected too.
Yeah, so they in the game they kind of talk about how he does deal with that a lot. Now, like I said before, in the game, Bill's town is significantly more run down. So and it's
that makes more sense.
Yeah, and it works too because it would throw people off. So like if you're walking into this area of town that doesn't have sort of this pristine nature to it, where it looks like someone's at least been doing some sort of work, and then like booby traps are going off and your people are getting killed, it's going to freak you out a little bit more, but it's also keeping you off edge. Whereas this, they're just kind of showing it in a different way. And it's not that it couldn't have worked, but it would have been more interesting if they had, like, if Bill had already been aware of some of the hunters, so that when you get that experience of seeing him surviving like that and that he is really capable at what he's doing. And then when Joel tells him about, like, look, your fence has only got this much time left, man. Like, you're going to need to do some things to upgrade it. It's like you, as the audience, you kind of get this understanding, like, he has been able to deal with this in the future, but if stuff is starting to break down because he's been here for so long and that's just what happens over time, that adds that bit of tension. And then if they had been able to do a little bit more with that scene where he was getting attacked by the hunters at nighttime, and it wasn't like we had talked about already, him standing out in the middle of the road.
There's just cover everywhere, and he's just
right out in the middle of the road, shooting at everyone.
His boyfriend is smart enough to be undercover.
Yeah,
who doesn't know how to use any of these guns, and he's just open.
Okay, so let's talk about their relationship a little bit more, because I think this is maybe at least the most contentious thing for us.
I think a lot of it was honestly good.
Okay.
Like there were moments that was like, yeah, it's fine. I don't mind if you have some kind of representation. But then there were scenes where it was very uncomfortable. Like the piano scene started off like kind of nice.
Yeah.
And then it shows Frank.
Bill.
Yeah, Frank.
Okay.
Just like the faces, the expressions on his faces were just really like sinisterly creepy. And I was like what is like that's not endearing. And then obviously the bedroom scene was just, I would have been uncomfortable if this was a straight couple too. It's not homophobia. It was a very uncomfortable sex scene. Yeah. And the dialogue is specifically was so weird.
It was a little weird. It kind of felt like what teenagers would be saying to each other in that situation.
Yeah. Yes.
I thought
that's exactly what it was.
Everything happened so fast. Like, he finds this guy in a hole.
I'm not a whore. I'm not gonna have sex with you just because you made me lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
it's like if I have, and he follows it up with saying, if I have sex with you, it means I'll get to stay a couple more days. We're like, so that's your payment, then, not the lunch. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
It's just odd because he's supposed to be this really skeptical guy, and he finds a guy he doesn't know at all in a hole. And he's gonna let him go, but then he's like, I'm really hungry, I need to let in. And I would have just been like, okay, we'll stay here, and I'm gonna lock everything, and I'll go get you some food. You know what I mean? And because he's thinking about protecting himself. Okay, well, he does have a gun. You can bring him in, but how do you know that he isn't with a group of people, hunters and things like that, or raiders or whatever?
Right.
You're just gonna trust his word that he says, no, I'm just here alone because I'm a bad liar. Well, maybe he's not a bad liar, and he's, lying to you right now. You know what I mean?
No, they're right. They did the bad liar thing. They did that in Knives Out.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
jeez.
I couldn't get to that. And then he takes him in and cooks him this meal. And then they go over to that's what I mean. Everything seemed forced, is that nothing came across to me as a natural build-up.
Like the progression was odd.
Yeah.
It would have been
Yeah.
interesting if if Bill like locks him up,
Yeah, left him in the hole for a
Yep.
little while or
or,
something.
or you know, like locks him in the basement for a couple of years just to like vet him to like make sure
Yeah.
he's not gonna tell people.
I
You
don't know
know,
about a
like
couple of years, but
Well,
and I say years, I mean a
locks them
couple
up
of days.
for a period of time, right?
sure. And well, the thing too is that
That's a good point because that makes a whole
And then
lot
they
more
start they
sense.
start
Yeah.
talking, and then they develop their relationship that way of like, oh, maybe I will let you out, and
I still think I mean I just have to try like push for the way that the game was, is that if they had kept a lot of this, but like you guys are saying, that they showed Bill as a little bit more unhinged as the years go by. So you see bits of it where it's like, okay,
more and more paranoid.
yeah, maybe he's like, you know what, man? He's like, I just can't trust you yet. I'm going to leave you down in this hole. Or like, yeah, maybe he does have a prison like somewhere on
Yeah.
his compound, and he leaves him there for a little
'Cause he
while.
would.
And, you know, yeah, he's like getting to know the guy, and then he realizes after a time that no one's coming for him. So like, maybe he is saying the truth, and so there's that little bit of tension there. But because of their situation, you know, it's like, and the time that they spent together, maybe they do fall in love, and then there's some sort of inciting incident that finally causes Frank to have enough, because again, that's where I thought they were headed, and he leaves, and then the end of the episode was like Ellie and Joel meeting up with Bill, and even if they change it so that Joel's like, hey, well, where's Frank? And then like maybe you get like the feet dangling, or like, you know, some sort of thing that pushes into like the next episode. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you're right. It really does progress through this too quickly.
Like,
I think
why
they-
would this guy?
I think they Sorry,
Go ahead.
Go on.
No, you go ahead.
I think they sacrificed a lot of that storytelling potential because they wanted to tell this story about two gay lovers.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's pretty much.
Like there are lots of more interesting, more realistic ways they could have taken it, but that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to say, "Hey, no, we're going to show this gay couple and everything's perfect about their life."
And then you could even show, like, as you put it, like, okay, so Bill has Frank locked up for a period of time, and then, you know, he's naturally, you know, becoming more paranoid while at the same time starting to trust Frank and building a relationship. And then you could have them, he decides one day to free him, and then you could have them have a relationship, but now Frank has this tension with Bill of keeping him locked up for so long, however long it was, whether if it was 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years or whatever,
Sure.
you know.
And not just that, but you have those paranoid incidences where, you know, they are seeing like they were doing, and that's why I thought that argument scene was good, because it was showing that they're different from each other. That it's like they have two different worldviews in the way that they see the current situation that they're in. Frank wants to make the most of it, and Bill is totally stuck in this survival mentality. Everything is it's like you can keep that narrative too of I guess that plot point of Bill caring about Frank, and Bill's only reason for like living at this point is like he's now got someone that he's trying to protect. And we're talking about The Last of Us here, so again, the tragedy behind their entire situation is right in line with sort of the thematic elements that are in this show. So I guess even the way that now we'll see what happens, like whether Bill pops back up at some point, and that's something that they're changing. Because like I was saying, there's moments in there.
I think
where
he's definitely dead.
Okay, I mean,
it is a possibility.
Yeah, it was just these little things where he was like, "Oh, you took this stuff too," and it's like, okay, well, it's like, depending on how you go with this, like that's not always the most effective way to do it. And so it's like it could work, maybe it doesn't. But yeah, I guess that ending and how that works out for this is really going to determine how this episode holds up by the time the rest of the season is done. Because if this is it, and we've just had this story between the two of them, and we're just away from Joel and Ellie, and the whole point was like, hey, we're just going to give you the backstory of the guy that they got the truck from. Anyway, moving on. Like that, it's weird, right?
Yeah, at that point, you would have to think that they did it just to insert their agenda and ideology into the show, because would they have done the same thing if it was just a straight couple? It's like,
that's exactly what I think it is. But
it doesn't come across to me a tangent of an episode comes across as alternative motives rather than trying to tell a natural story progression.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the timing of the episode. Maybe it's like I'm not even necessarily saying they can't do a backstory about them within this episode. Maybe just not as long. Like keep the main plot moving forward, and maybe it's just not as much. Maybe you're getting, as you mentioned, maybe it's sticking more towards to the game, and to where you get introduced to Bill through and Frank through Joel and Ellie, perspective. And then, you're getting some dialogue there from Bill about him and Frank. And then maybe you have some flashbacks that's showing, how they met, and, or maybe it's just a throwaway line from one of them about how they met. And you kind of get to see some early beginnings of that too. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
it just seemed very odd. Again, not saying it's a terrible episode. It's a fine episode, but
there are red flags everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think this was done just to tell a story.
No. I mean, it's Neil Druckmann.
Because that's not how you tell stories.
Right. And Neil Druckmann being heavily involved with this, it wouldn't surprise me if technically is right about that. And like Bill's gone and this is just an episode. And then it's like, well, like what? Bill is an interesting character. Like, why is he just gone now? Like what?
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
what were you guys doing with this?
Yeah, he's my
There were
favorite
so
part of the
many
show so
people.
far. I
Yeah.
loved his character.
I completely agree. Like, Bill is probably the best character within the show. Outside of, I do like Bill and like Joel's daughter Sarah. But Bill is definitely
Sarah
more.
was
There's more
good,
depth.
right?
There's more depth to Bill, and I think you could easily have this dilemma of now the person he loved has died, and how do I handle that in this horrible setting of the world? How do I move on? Do I just stay here and keep trying to survive, or do I try and meet up with Joel and Tess? What do I do? And I think even seeing the more of the strain of the apocalyptic world, the infected and the hunters and raiders on the relationship would have been better too.
Yeah.
Along with like,
Yeah,
one
it
of
does-
the things like with being married and again, not just being married, but having family and friends and stuff like that, is that when you have a close relationship with someone, you typically have another person or a few other people you can vent to and get wisdom and counsel from, and they don't get to have that in this. It's just them two 24/7. So you could kind of you get to see more of, especially the psychological part of that and living in this world and how that could affect them, regardless of their little utopia they've insulated themselves in from, which I'm not entirely on board with either.
Right.
I think it's a really good point, and probably why this felt so out of place is because the rest of the world is very cynical.
Yeah.
And then we take this deviation down, butterflies and rainbow lane where everything's perfect, and it doesn't feel like it fits in the same universe. It would have been more interesting, like we said, if he gets locked up and then they develop a relationship, and Frank could have even been like questioning his own feelings after is this just Stockholm syndrome? Like, do I only like him because he's the only one here? And then that eventually leads to him leaving, and
there's nuance and depth to that.
Yeah.
It feels like there's depth to the rest of the world, and this is just no. We want this to be our perfect shining example of our diversity and the message.
Now, I have two things I want to talk about specifically.
Okay.
One of them is more that I think that one of the things this episode actually does really well is that it's a strong argument for why I think that if you were going beyond Joel and Ellie's story in The Last of Us, it should be done from the perspective of other survivors instead of just doing more of their story. If you did, because like if I'm being honest, and I can't really speak for Neil Druckmann, but I always have had the feeling that Neil Druckmann just did not know where to go next with Joel and Ellie.
Right.
And he wanted to tell like almost a completely different story, but he had to keep those characters in there because
So you're saying if they want to make more than 2 seasons of television?
Well, just in general, I always thought that was the direction that they should have gone. It was that, okay, you have The Last of Us. It was the story of Joel and Ellie. Their story is done. It's like everyone loves that. Leave it alone. Now figure out a way to do another really engaging story in the same universe, dealing with
okay.
Yeah. And that's kind of what you get with Bill and Frank. There is there's elements in there of something that is really interesting. And I also think that potentially with the television show, there is an opportunity for them to do that while keeping some of those similar elements that people know in there. But that's partially because I think the show's probably going to be really popular. And if you go into a second season and you're already removing half of the cast, because a lot of people know what happens, I don't know if audiences are going to be on board with it.
It's currently performing pretty well. It had the biggest. It's not getting the Game of Thrones numbers, but it had the largest increase from week 1 to week 2. I think it was 22% more viewers.
Now, the other question I have for you guys is, do you think that there was a way for this episode to work with what we were given? Especially, let's like the ending of what happens with Frank and Bill. If we were talking like they're keeping a lot of the same beats, including kind of having more of this like nice ending, you could say. I
think it works a lot better if Bill doesn't die at the end.
Yeah.
And then he has to keep going, living with what he lost.
Mm-hmm. You
could even have this scene like to where instead of Frank dying, which I mean, I'm glad they just didn't say that, they kind of left it open-ended. I thought for a second, I'm like, oh, please don't tell me they're going to say he has AIDS and stereotype him into that. I was worried for a second. I was like, please don't do that.
They made Joel a...
It kind of looked like that's what it was.
Yeah.
It didn't really look like cancer.
He had some sort of like neuro issue though, right?
Yeah, I thought about ALS maybe, but it would have been better too, I think, instead of him dying from a disease, maybe some raiders come or something, and maybe Frank goes out to get material or something like that, and Bill tags along with him or whatnot, and Bill's trying to protect him from an infected or from a couple people or whatever, and he's Frank ends up dying, and Bill wasn't able to protect him, and he has to deal with that. That could have been a route to go down to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was just kind of curious because I mean, it's something that when you're talking about these like endpoints or like the way that they decide to do these things, I'm always wondering if there's a way to make it work properly. And I think you guys are right. Yeah. If they had kept him, if Bill's alive, and again, that's why I was talking about that earlier. If for whatever reason Bill shows back up this season, it would
have been worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, because what's the point of all of this if it's just the guy they got the truck from? Because that's essentially what they've turned him into.
Yeah.
Rather than
they don't even interact with him at all.
Yeah, and he's gotten he has gotten
Ellie doesn't even see him.
Oh, exactly, and he's gotten
this is
more.
Just the backstory of the battery guy.
Yeah, he has more character development and more story beats than either of our main characters so far.
Yes,
exactly.
And so I'm just like, if he's gone, like
that's
what are you doing?
Me think it's like, okay, this seems more about agenda than you're trying to tell a good story.
Yeah.
Like, let me make sure I insert my ideology within here.
Yeah.
Well, and comparing it to the game too, like this is the moment where like Ellie kind of gets like responsibility thrust on her because she has to drive the truck while they're shooting zombies and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And she's never seen a truck, which is just like kind of throwing her into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
Yep.
And hey, this it's crazy, and it's kind of where they develop a lot of trust for each other in the games, and none, it hasn't been done at all on the show yet. They don't even like each other yet.
Yeah, it's really, so I think we're not quite there yet. But there are two characters that will probably show up in next week's episode, and they'll be there for, my guess is 2 episodes. But again, they've changed some things, so I've been a little every once in a while I get a little thrown off because I'm like, oh, okay, we're moving ahead. All right, this is where we're at now.
Did you guys like the aging though? Like I thought it looked silly.
Yeah, again, it's weird. It's weird because Bill isn't. I don't even think he's quite this old in the game.
No, he's not.
So I guess it just depends.
It's extra weird when it's contrasted with Joel and
Ellie.
And the other chick that's dead too. Like it shows him,
Tess. Yeah,
before the 20 years and after the 20 years, and he's the same guy. But for some reason, Nick Offerman just aged like 50 years.
Yeah, I don't think they should have killed Bill off if they in fact have. They should have kept him around. I think that's a good point technically.
You know what's really weird?
But as far as the aging is concerned, nothing really stood out to me to where I thought it was bad personally.
I was trying to find this shot of Nick Offerman from the behind the scenes. It's
without his mustache. It's so creepy.
Really weird.
He does not look good without facial hair.
No. Where was it?
In the behind the scenes. It was closer to the end.
Was it closer to the end?
Yeah,
that is technically Mexican saying that. That's TECA.
I love Nick Offerman, but man, he looks like a naked mole rat when he shaves.
He has he's got a high and tight, and he's completely clean shaven. I'll keep looking for it in a minute, but yeah, I didn't think too much about it. I think his beard definitely looks pretty fake.
There. That did.
Which makes sense now that that he was clean shaven for all of this, which probably makes more sense for what they were trying to do, like show him like aging over time. Yeah, man, if that's the direction they went, I don't know. I hope he's alive.
And with the aging, they were kind of hinting at that too. With they're sitting in the garden and he can barely stand up. It's like, I'm sorry that I got old before you did.
Yeah.
But Frank looked worse than he.
Yeah. Well, and I think what they were trying to go for too is that like Frank was way healthier. I mean, the dude is in pretty good shape. It wasn't. And then like Bill's character is the one who seems to be doing better like throughout their life for the most part. But yeah, so then
And was that were those organic strawberries by chance?
Oh, bro, I don't know. One of the other things that I thought was interesting too, and this is more of just like a game detail, the part where they're getting attacked by the hunters, and Frank goes in to pick up that gun. That is game accurate to the gun that Ellie gets. And honestly, Jenna would probably be able to tell me that she's beaten our troll Jenna has beaten this game more times than I have. I can't remember exactly where Ellie gets the gun in the game, but I saw that and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, like maybe Frank will like give that, or like maybe he'll have this conversation with Bill. Like she'll meet Bill, and when Bill's sending him on their way, Bill gives her Frank's gun. And it's like, this is really important to me. Like, I hope it can actually help you. Like, because there's still that, he may be, it's the one she's got in the first game. Oh, let me see. I'll just point. I'll pull it up because she just steals it from Bill's house. I guess technically it's not stealing because he said they could take whatever they want.
I sent you a picture in the Discord of Nick Offerman shaved. It's not from the interview, but
let me see if I can.
It's off. It's so off.
Oh man,
it doesn't even look like him. It doesn't even look like him.
It's a completely
That's
different
hilarious.
person.
Let me see if I can
play Joel.
I'll swing this over in front for everybody to see. He's right there. Make it a little bigger. That's pretty funny. Oh man. But yeah, she gets a gun. I don't know how you guys felt about the, I guess, payoff for that, because she's been asking like the whole episode, and I think she was asking a bunch in the previous episode.
Yeah.
I don't think there has been payoff. I think it'll be paid off when she uses it.
Yeah. Oh man, I just had a shot of it.
But also, I probably would have given her a gun
Do you think they're gonna?
If I was Joel.
Yeah, there's. Sorry,
Do you think
Joseph, go
he's
ahead.
just gonna be a perfect shot in the next episode?
I hope not, because even Joel, and that was a nice thing, whether that
Yep.
was an on-purpose dig at The Walking Dead or not, that he was like, you just miss sometimes.
Yeah.
And she clearly doesn't understand because she's like, well, are you a bad shot or what? And he's like, no, it's not how it works.
Yeah, Walking Dead, they get headshots every single time.
Oh, they're the perfect aim somehow.
Aimbot.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a headshot. It's a small target, and especially if it's moving.
So yeah, but this is pretty accurate to the one that she's got in the first game. And so like when I saw Frank pick it up, I was like, oh, all right. And I don't know. I mean, that's most of the episode. Was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about?
No, I think that pretty much covered it for me.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, the show is pretty good. I'm enjoying it. There are just red flags everywhere that just make me scared of
What's to come?
what's to come. But
Yeah, they have
the
this. Sorry, go ahead.
production's pretty great. The effects look good.
Editing is great too.
Yeah, I haven't.
I
Sorry, go ahead.
I love the designs of the zombies. I think that's translated really, really well in adaptation.
I completely agree.
It was a little weird, and I guess it's just because in the game you don't get the kind of moments like she did with that one that was buried down in the basement. But like the thing like with it following her eyes around or whatever, it's like really off-putting because they have these conversations about like, well, are these things alive?
Right.
Like what's happened to them? And so when the way that you can still see some of that human characteristics in them, it's kind of freaky. So yeah, I mean, there's so much to like about this show. And I can't help but feel like we're just still headed for a train wreck. That it's gonna go off the rails.
Well,
I don't know.
I've been wrong before. It's very infrequent. I ate my hat with House of the Dragon. I thought it was going to be horrible, and it's probably the best thing of television I've seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But I've been right about everything else. So we'll see. We'll see.
I just don't
I feel
trust.
like I'm just waiting for that cliff. Okay, where
Yep.
when's it coming?
Yeah. Well, episode 1 of season 2, probably.
I can't see Neil Druckmann repenting from. There's no way he's going to change.
Zach's brought up a good point in the troll room too. That this was something I was wondering about. He said, "I thought that killing the infected in the basement might alert others." And this is
I was thinking that same thing.
Joseph and I talked about that last week, where I'm still waiting for that to become a plot point again, and not just like it was a thing. We're done with that. We're moving on.
Yeah, that's convenient for the script in this point.
That's one thing we didn't. Yeah, we didn't discuss this about episode 3. The changes to how the infection spreads, because it spores are right out, and instead it was the wheat was bad, but that was a one-time thing, and now it only spreads through bites.
Yeah,
I think it's a step down.
Supply.
Yeah, and they explained it in the behind the scenes. They said it was more logical this way, and it makes way less sense. So, this like spores make sense with with fungus. But they don't want their actors to wear face masks. So,
yeah, it's like the age that we live in. All the superheroes are just running around without
their costumes.
Yeah, their masks on. And I guess Batman is still technically doing it, so that's something. But
yes, the specific like the hive mind, everything's connected with the roots. Oh, I had problems with episode 2. They go through explaining how dangerous it is, and then the next scene he shoves his hand into a bunch of the mushrooms Oh no, it's okay. They're dry, but what if they weren't?
Yeah.
That's a
Like
big risk.
you didn't know that it was dry until you shoved your hand into it. But yeah, it does feel like, hey, this was a cool idea, and we haven't thought about the implications whatsoever.
Yeah, they're trying pretty hard to convince everyone that they're making the best decisions on the like part of the audience. So like the spores thing was a big part of that. It's why they decided to do the whole everybody's connected rather than
what they replaced it with makes less sense.
and may never come up again. Like I'm just wondering. I mean, I just don't know when the whole they're all connected or potentially connected, because it's like, and that's the problem, because it's something that if it's only connected when it's important to the story.
Yeah,
It's like, it's like y'all, you wrote yourselves into a corner with that one, I think.
Yep.
Whereas the spores, they have a specific purpose. Typically, they're only found underground. And all you had to do was essentially be like, well, they're not able to survive in the sunlight or the cold or like something. Because there's all this stuff that they'd already set up about human body temperatures and the way that these things are able to infect people and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, you can do your science fiction mumbo jumbo that's believable enough for that. But when you have something so definitive, like step on the wrong spore and everything comes running, and then you don't use it very often, or you kill a infected, and it's like, well, I guess you're lucky that one wasn't connected to a hive mind. Like it's a little weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably not going to come up as much as it should.
Oh shoot.
But
Yeah, and I wonder how that would even work at the convenience store. Exactly, is it that each infected is connected to the hive mind, or is it the fungus lines, tentacles, or whatever you want to call them? That once those are touched, they activate and let almost like a web, right? To where you hit the web and it lets you know the location. Yeah, the vibrations and everything.
I accidentally exited out of the live stream. I got worried for a second that something bad happened, because it was like it went, chat is not available. I was like, oh no, the troll room got too wild. But I think we're good.
it's still live.
Good. Yeah. Everything looks okay. That was just, oh man, I hit a button or something.
Zax makes a good point in the troll room that the temperature thing is already weird. Wouldn't saunas or sweat lodges be a potential cure? Or I think it was, though, that global warming caused it to. So wouldn't then?
I think the idea is that the cordyceps themselves have mutated.
Yeah, because of global warming.
I'm trying to steal, man.
Hotter.
I would have to go back and listen to that part of the first episode again.
Because the objection was cordyceps can't live in humans because their body temperatures are too high. And then the explanation, the counterpoint was, yes, but if, for example, global warming made all of the world warm up a little bit, the cordyceps would be forced to adapt to be able to live in hotter temperatures.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is still, I guess.
But then,
yeah.
But how hot can they get?
Right.
Getting
right.
into
That's
a
a good point.
sauna or sweat lodges, or
if
just,
you live
really
in the
hot
desert
outside.
or like somewhere where stuff like that doesn't typically survive, is there? And that's just world building stuff. And I don't know. I mean, I don't even think The Last of Us in the games they've ever talked about certain areas where they're less likely to be like infected or whatever.
Right.
But then I guess that's kind of where you get into the stuff with humans and these different factions that have popped up around the United States, which could be interesting. I know Joseph's talked about how he's a little worried about it. That it just the show,
humans are always the real monster.
Yeah. Well, just wait, man. Second season's coming.
We are the Walking Dead.
Yeah. Which, dude,
It was
back
the humans. It was the humans the whole time.
Back when that show first came out and that was the revelation, you're like, oh my gosh, yes. And then now it's like, ugh, like please, please don't do this anymore.
It's been done to death.
Did you guys like The Walking Dead? It's come up a little bit, and I don't know your opinions on it. Season one.
Season one. not. I want to say like the first half of season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then Carol's daughter goes missing, right?
Yeah.
And then
she's found in the camper or whatever.
And that's like the second half of the season. There's interesting stuff in that show. They deviate way too much from the source material.
They do this episode 3 all the time, where they do like a vignette episode that has nothing to do with the plot, and you're like, okay, this is nice, but also like it's filler.
yeah. And they started doing this thing, and the thing that finally got me to stop watching it was you realize after a while that the way that characters are portrayed is that someone gains a conscience and they are killed at the end of that episode or in the next episode. And it was like over and over and over again. And then it was like, I'm good. Like, I always thought Michonne was a really cool character. And then they just, I don't know. I mean, like, she's there, and there's a lot of stuff that they did that I just wasn't really into. But man,
agreed.
That show was popular for AMC. They do not want to let it go.
They keep spinning it off. Well, they end it with it's weird. They ended it, but then they're spinning off the characters that they removed like 3 seasons ago, and
they're doing some movies, like these TV movies or something. And Fear the Walking Dead still going on, right?
I started watching it again because I hadn't had Netflix in a long time, and I got it to review Glass Onion, and so I'm like, okay, I'll watch a couple. And like in season 10 is like the worst thing I've ever experienced. I hate it so much,
man.
So yeah, it just.
But I'm on season 10. There's only one more, so I'm like, do I just finish? Do I just power through this? Right.
Yeah, man.
It's not good.
I understand. That it seems like there's so much. There's like there's a lot of TV I haven't been watching. I've been kind of enjoying just talking about this specific show. There's a couple movies I'm looking forward to, but like so far, I mean, we're right at the end of January, but video games have kind of been that thing that I've been more connected to recently. Just as far as like my personal entertainment, because I don't know, TV. It's like it's so hard to find good stuff, and like I'm so over just about everything that's coming out of Disney at this point. Did you ever finish Willow? I haven't watched it.
Yes.
But
yeah, we did finish it. It is it's worse than The Rings of Power.
Really, you think it's bad?
Yeah.
Really, I thought it was great. Which part did you think was bad?
It's horrible. I love the movie. I absolutely love the film. It's one of my favorite things. And in the opening monologue, in the recap of the movie, in the first 5 minutes of the show, they just crap all over Madmartigan's character, and it was disgusting.
Dude, my wife and I tried to watch it this past weekend, and we watched the first 15 minutes and then turned it off and went to something else. The first 15 minutes is bad.
I am going through It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So comedy, I think, like, and those type of shows.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a real good show.
Zach's was talking about these sort of like sitcom-esque shows on one of his live streams. I think it was last week. And It's Always Sunny is the one that I've seen a lot of it, but I've never really gone all the way through it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to finally do that. So that's kind of like, that'll be, and it's nice because they're like 30-minute episodes. You can sit down, you can watch a couple, you're good to go. You can go back to playing like Dead Space or Hogwarts Legacy when it comes out.
There's no overall plot you need to keep up on because the characters are written purposefully to never progress.
Only bad people play Hogwarts Legacy, David.
Oh, well, hopefully it's good for the channel, man.
Yeah, I don't even I barely play video games, and I'm going to buy that game.
Man. Yeah. It's it actually, I don't know, man. I was watching some previews of some people got some early access to it, and I was like, all right. And you can use like
it comes out February 10th, right?
Yeah.
You can use the unforgivable curses.
Yes, you can use the bad spells. And so I'm going to do Ravenclaw. and my whole identity is going to be around being so smart that I don't care that these things are bad, and do more than J.K. Rowling did with some of her characters outside of the Gryffindors.
I'm just going to go straight to learning the curses as fast as possible so I can just then go around killing everyone. So that's my goal.
If it's like Grand Theft Auto, but with spells.
With like teenage wizards.
You could go back and forth into the real world.
You just walk around, punch someone off their broom, fly around, shoot some curses at people. That'll be fun.
It'd be great if you could go back and forth from the Harry Potter world to like London or what, just like a small city in England or whatnot. You could just mess with people in there.
Yeah, let me kill like Muggles.
And then like the more you kill, like it's a Dementor army that comes after you. Like
that'd be dope.
It just keeps building and building and building. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Grand
interested.
Theft Auto, Harry Potter.
I hope it's good, because that poor studio has
so much hate.
Yeah, they've been dealing with so much unnecessary hate, and it seems like a lot of people are trying to like interview the game director, and he's like, well, the game's really, he's like, yeah, but tell us about J.K. Rowling. And he's like, but our game's pretty cool. You can use
tell us about your politics.
Yeah.
That's what we want in our games. We want more politics.
Yeah. So I'll be picking that up and trying to stream it as much as I can. I don't know if I'll stream it every time I play, just because apparently it's like a 100-hour game. Like if you do the main story and a bunch of like side quest stuff. So I'm curious about that. Resident Evil 4 remake comes out this year. New Legend of Zelda. It's potentially going to be a really good year for games, which is good, because I'm less than impressed with the lineup of television and movies this year.
I'm also a big fan of single player, just story games.
Yeah,
I hate it when the game is sacrificed so that they can do a multiplayer thing, and you don't get as many of those as you used to.
No, so. I barely play multiplayer games anymore. Trying to find the time for it. Yeah, and then like now everything is so like loot and grind based, and so it's really hard to just pick something up and play it for a couple hours when you have like kids who have done everything in a weekend, and they've already learned all of the little like tricks to be better than everybody else, and you're like, oh cool, I'm ready to play. And then you just constantly are dying, and you're like, I was like, maybe I'll just go play the single player game. It's
and
like,
your
whatever.
blood pressure isn't up.
Or if you have kids that take up all of your time.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Well, all right, guys.
Nope. Don't leave.
Oh, you didn't do it at the beginning. That's on me.
No, actually, I kind of wanted to do it at the end.
Okay.
But so we utilize a value for value system here, which means you can support us by donating your time, talent, and treasure. The goal is to be completely supported by our listeners. Time and talent meaning any skill or effort you want to put into developing our platform. That could be editing, audio, video editing. That can be if you want to do artwork, whatever skill you have that you think would benefit us. You can just email us, get in contact with us on social media, wherever, and if we think it's good, we'll use it. If we'll provide some feedback to you. And then your treasure just meaning your money. So you can click the direct.me link in the top of the chat or in the description of our YouTube video, or if you're listening on the podcast, in the show notes. And there you'll find our PayPal link, and you will also only find that because we don't have the Bitcoin wallet on there. So just
still working through that.
PayPal. And if you do donate through PayPal, be sure to include a note if you want it to be read live on air. If you do donations of $100 or less, you automatically become a producer. Donations of $200 or less, you get the producer credit and assistant executive producer credit. Donations of $200 or more, you get the executive producer credit. And today, for episode of 128, our producer is John Burke. So thank you again, John. And I just want to say, as far as the treasure is concerned, all we're asking for is $1 reoccurring month payment. So if you think it's worth $1, or if you think it's worth more than that, feel free to do that. But that's all we're asking for, so that we can eventually get around to doing this full time and creating better quality content for you all.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it helps in a couple ways, because we don't have to sell you ads. And if for some reason we get demonetized,
like Raid Shadow Legends.
Yeah, if we get demonetized for having the wrong people on, technically Mexican, we can.
I didn't think I was that controversial.
Not yet, man. Just wait.
Not yet, but it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just any of the things that typically cause you to be unwelcomed by ad revenue, the value for value system is a method for avoiding that. And of course, it's not perfect, because we all know how PayPal can be, but we figure we're at this point right now where they're not even looking at people like us. Like, it's
not
probably under the radar.
Yeah, yeah. So that, and we like that. And, if that's the way that it stays, that's great. And if we have to figure out some other methods, that's great too. So, yeah. Technically Mexican, would you like to promote your channel? I've posted your link in the chat for everyone. And we would definitely love to have you back on. So please.
Oh, I'd love to come back on.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for inviting me. It's super fun. I love talking about nerdy things. I started my channel because I wanted to talk about nerdy things, but also because I quit my job and I needed to do something. I have a wide variety of things on my channel, which is not good for the algorithm at all. But I'm a comedian, I'm a musician, and I'm a nerd, and I like making content on all of those things. So, but yeah, I make memes. I also do a weekly podcast live stream on Sundays, Best Gen. Yeah, check out my channel. I've guaranteed a couple laughs at the minimum.